Great innovation stories make change possible. Each week on the Innovation Storytellers podcast, I invite innovation leaders to share how they overcame the obstacles to introduce breakthrough ideas to the world through the power of story. I'm featuring guests from Tesla, TD Ameritrade, Corning, Cisco, Bloomberg, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can tell a more effective innovation story and change the future for the better. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of Innovation Storytellers, and I cannot wait to get into all things artificial today. Natural intelligence coupled with artificial intelligence makes all of us much smarter and hopefully more productive and more thoughtful about what's coming next. And so I'm here to talk with one of the experts in AI, Joti Balani. And let me just give you a little bit of background about Joti. She is a creative technology architect who has been designing and delivering complex enterprise, human, and systemic transformations across this multidimensional framework that blends AI and data science and engineering and social sciences all together. And as an anthropologist, that matters to me. She is the founder and managing director of FreshRiver.AI, which is based on socio-capitalistic business model. And we're going to talk about that. And she leads a team on these incredible adventures into transformative innovations at Fortune 100 companies to create really unique emotional, economic, and brand value to companies that I think they probably never thought possible before. Joti is also unique in this field because she is interested in democratizing AI and data science for small to medium-sized businesses, as well as large companies, by incubating a service where SMBs can hire AI assistants to build by ethical and emotionally intelligent next generation platforms. So Joti just doesn't do great AI. She also is a technology advisor and Sherpani, that's the female form of Sherpa, at an organization called FemPeak.ai, where she empowers and prepares the next generation of female leaders to solve critical global problems in business and society with creativity. And so without further ado, I'm going to dive right in and welcome Joti Balani. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Susan. That was a very kind introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, you've done a lot and you keep doing a lot. So it's hard to get your arms around, my arms at least, around all that you do. So, as we get started in this conversation, the first question I ask everyone on the show is, tell me how you got here. Because nobody gets innovation, much less AI, in a direct path. So how did you get here?
Well, if I want to sum it up in one word, it's curiosity. So I started my career as a software engineer, comp sci degree. My dad said, hey, computer science isn't on the rise. Why don't you go ahead and, do that as well? I said, all right. I didn't have any better idea. I did want to be a dancer, by the way. So he said, maybe not. Let's not go down that path right now.
Wait. What kind of dancer? Are we talking like Broadway? What are we looking at?
Just a professional dancer in like hip hop. And, I wanted to go into that world, but he said, why don't you do that after you finish your computer science degree and you can see what you want to do. So I've always loved music and dancing. So, that's another side story I've got. So anyway, do my comp sci degree. I'm a software engineer for a couple of years. And the one thing that keeps gnawing at me is like, well, what problem does this solve for anybody? So I grew up in the wireless, wireline, telecom, cloud infrastructure space, it's about 20 years, right? So the first 5 years, I'm in there coding and I'm going, what problem is it solving? And I annoyed the heck out of everybody so much. And I said, you know what? I think I probably need to go look for a job that allows me to frame the problem in a way that we can see what technology needs to solve. Because technology is a means to an end. It's not the actual end, right? A lot of people get that, saying, oh, it's cool. I said, yeah, it's cool, but what does it really do? Anyway, that took me into a journey into product development and management at AT&T. It's one of the very first large companies. I had worked at Texas Instruments before that. And that really was where I dove in deep into understanding how products are born, how you articulate problems, and nonetheless B2B problems, right? We're talking about the wireless space, right? Not very sexy, but it's bandwidth. It's the thing that underpins our entire world, right? The internet and private networks. So that's where I cut my teeth. I loved it. I then went on to do product development for a mid-sized company, where also it was, well, what problem are we solving? And this was on the fiber optics networks. So if you think about Verizon Fios, for example, the fiber optic cabling that they lay down, where we get blazing fast speed. That's the technology that I went into to create bigger and bigger pipelines for large companies. One of the interesting use cases I will tell you there is algo traders. So they would buy these big fat bandwidth pipes, all to save milliseconds on their trades that translated to millions and millions of dollars.
So we're talking about algorithmic stock traders.
Trading,
right?
that's correct.
Yeah.
Right. So, when you ask me, like, how did I get there? It was always that thought process. What problem is it? What is it that they're trying to solve for? And then you go, figure that out. So anyway, a dozen years later, I say, you know what? I want to now figure out, how do you market these services, right? Because I could never find a good marketing team for the products that my team and I were creating to say, how do you explain what this does to, buyers, IT teams and operations teams? So I went on a journey for 5 years, and I said, I'm going to leverage data and analytics to create a marketing framework. And that's how my brain works, is like, I need a framework, rough sketch it, and then we all go out and figure out and work with the smartest people in the world that I can find to go fill that in. So I guess I've been wired that way, fast forwarding now out of corporate. So I spent, 20 or so years in corporate, and I decided 3 years ago, you know what? I think I can go create something of my own, having worked in like large companies, mid-sized companies, small companies, pivoted from software engineer to product development to marketing. And then I fell into AI when my husband's company he and his partner have a healthcare technology company. It's now 10 years old. He showed me how they were using Alexa as an overlay on top of their healthcare platform to help chronically ill baby boomers be able to record the medications that they're taking, the symptoms that they're feeling, all without having to go and learn how to use these things, right? Because we know that there's a generational gap when it comes to those.
Yes. I spent 6 months trying to teach my 94-year-old mom how to use a smartphone, which only made her feel dumb, and she's brilliant, So we went back to flip phone, and life is better.
Life is better. See, so I always tell folks, look, the way we've come along from interfaces, we've gone from the internet, which is the web, then the cloud, then the mobile interface came around, right? Smartphones and tablets. The natural, and this is the third wave that is actually going to, I think, help the last mile problem, is communication. Because for the last 20, 30 years, humans have had to learn how to use tech, right? All over from mouse to, keyboards to swiping left and right and up and down. AI has now gotten to the point where it can now allow the humans to speak to it. That's a big deal. So when I found out what they were doing, I said, well, that's a problem you can solve, because now more people, and it's the societal impact, right? Having baby boomers be able to go and record and take care of their health the most that they need it, right? So I always take a look at the tech and say, what big impact can it create? So that's when I fell into conversational AI, which is a branch of AI that's focused on bringing the natural language, humans and machines to talk. If you think about all the movies that we watched growing up for the last, 10, 15 years, it's not that far ahead yet. I always warn people that, AI is still in the toddler stage. It's not adult yet. And so if you compare human to, you as an anthropologist, if I were to tell you what's the anthropology for AI, I think it's really, really exciting. So anyway, getting into innovation, I think it's a mindset. And I think if you're curious and you have the right spirit on what you're trying to do, a lot of people will say, oh, we're going to, make millions and millions of dollars. I said, well, you know what? I think that's a pleasant outcome of solving a real problem for someone. If you always keep an eye on that, you're constantly innovating. I mean, think about it. even before the internet came around, if you think about the industrial revolution, if you think about all the revolutions we've gone through, farming, right? What was the biggest innovation there? Being able to till the land so you can harvest faster. So, we stand on the shoulder of giants, right? So every innovation is taking what the previous generations gave us for us to bring together to solve more problems. So hopefully that made a little sense on how I described it.
Absolutely. Well, what I love about the work that you do, Joti, is how you take such a different approach to thinking about AI. And when we hear voice and AI, I think the first thing we think of is Alexa. And when you mentioned baby boomers, and I think about, there's a great Saturday Night Live skit called Alexa Silver for the Greatest Generation. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think you and your husband would really appreciate it. It's hysterical. And it's about, like the greatest generation can refer to Alexa as any name that begins with the letter A, like Amelia and Odessa and whatever else, because some of them can't remember, right, what we actually call Alexa, or, where's my phone? It's in your right hand. So they kind of make fun of this whole thing about how the greatest generation will be using AI. But for the rest of us, especially those working in corporate settings, how do you begin? Can you give us an example of a project where a large company says, we want to use artificial intelligence. We know we can be doing better. Give us some ideas of, how we can modernize a particular process or think about a process in a different way and save us on the productivity that we all crave.
Sure. So it all starts with context, right? As I imagine every enterprise, not just the Fortune 100, right? Everybody started to adopt web, mobile, cloud now, right? Is on its way for transforming companies in a big way. I put it in context to say you have to think about AI in that continuum. Right. So if you think about all the projects that you're doing, you're solving one of usually 4 to 5 problems as a business, right? It's your top line, it's your bottom line, it's your customer experience, it's personalization, right? You're really trying to figure out how to make your performance better. And I take it in that context and I start, with a simple question saying, what are the top 3 problems you're trying to solve right now? Different companies are trying to solve. For example, I had one recent client say to me, we're focused on margin improvement. So I need you to help us reduce cost in our contact center. I said, okay, brilliant. Now we have direction on where to go to, because it always has to tie back to what the company needs to do. So, when I'm meeting with a lead for one of these projects, I go, especially if it's a public company, I go read their 10K, I look at the investor presentations, and I say, what are the top 3 problems that they are facing? And then we work backwards from that, because it has to connect the dots to that, right? And the framework I bring together starts with this first step that says use case extraction. What is the problem? Why is it a problem? And for whom it's a problem? I don't allow anybody to talk about the technology until we're all very clear about those 3 questions. And, usually people will run through very quickly the use case and start building stuff and designing stuff. And I said, listen, if you're going to skip this step, I can guarantee you what's going to come out of the other end will not perform the way you expect it to perform. Because everybody thinks AI is magic. I said, well, AI is not quite magic. It's magical if you follow the framework. Right. So this is where being a product developer has really helped me out. Right. So when I sit down with a client, I said, let's talk about those problems. What are your metrics? So we typically have heads of innovation, heads of technology, heads of operations center, heads of business functions bringing us in, because remember, they have a metric to hit. They're solving a specific set of problems. I said, let's start there. But as we know, right, every company and every organization, they have to work together in order for them to achieve the highest level goals of, revenue and cost reduction and customer experience. So we start there, and they bring in their peers from the organizations that they depend on, right? Innovation teams need the technology teams who need the operations teams, right? And they also need the heads of contact centers or heads of business functions to come in because, as budgets are sitting in different places, people have different levels of control, and, there's a whole political framework too. But by asking those questions around the use case, it's actually a unifier, because everybody around the table starts to think about, oh, what is the problem? And I take them on a journey to say, when I say, what is the problem, why it's a problem, and for whom, everybody immediately goes to, it's the end customer. It could be employees, or it could be your consumers, or it could be B2B. However, there's always two sides to a story, right? So if you think about contact centers, and that's on my mind because that's like one of the biggest use cases, just exploded because of the pandemic and the Great Resignation.
So we're talking about call centers, right? We're talking about a customer calling in and saying, I need support with my product or service.
That's correct. I need help with, yep. Right. So they're calling in. Doesn't matter what the company does, right? Everybody has contact centers and customer call centers, right? But the other end of the whom is the agent. So if you think about a customer calling in, there is a human that's human here, there's a human here, and they're trying to solve a problem together, right? This human's trying to figure out how to help the customer. So the for whom is this person. AI has the ability to actually help both sides of the equation, right? By having the agent, for example, ask the AI assistant, quickly look up, the question to the answer, because they also need training. The customer can talk to the AI assistant to get answers to their problems quickly, right? Which would normally take a long time. And, we have less and less people available now as agents to sit in the contact centers. So people call in, get their work done, and they're out on their way.
It should work.
It should work, right? Uh-huh. Simple things like, I need to activate my member ID. Simple things. I want to, pay my bill.
Or return a product.
Return a product. The rule of thumb is, as long as you've got an API to the content and data in all the backend systems, this AI assistant can go consume all of that. The magic is in the design and the training for the AI, right? That's where we get into the technology part, the how. Right? There's speech to text conversion, then there's natural language processing, there's sentiment analysis. There's so much. That's really what AI has enabled, has gotten better and better. Because, AI was invented in the 50s, but only when space and power became cheaper and more data was available, did the AI start to get better and better and better. Because it takes time. It's like a child that's born. It's an infant first, and you feed it care, you give it data, you train it correctly, that's where ethics comes in, because our data is dirty. That's when it gets better and better. And the brain that it has, over time starts to connect more to others. It's still in the toddler stage. I tell people, don't put your expectation too high. If you've got a complicated use case where you need two humans to talk, you cannot put AI in there. Please don't put AI in there, because if a human cannot write out exactly what the solution is to a problem a customer is calling in for, it's not suitable for AI. You need a human.
So let's talk about a real world scenario about a client that you've worked with, and how you've kind of, gotten this idea from starting line to finish line. Give us an example so we can really get our head around it.
Sure. One of my favorite clients and projects actually is with a Fortune 40 retailer. It's a home improvement store, and I'm not at full liberty just to say the name, but you can pretty much figure out which ones it could be. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
They had the most perfect set of humans in charge of the project on their side. They had an executive leadership that believed in this. They had the technical management that was ready, and they'd been trying to do this for a couple of years. And when they brought FreshRiver in, they said, we can't get it off the ground. Our IVR is so old. We are not investing it anymore. It's on its knees. We've got to replace.
Sorry, what's IVR for some of because we have people from all disciplines listening.
Got it. IVR is interactive voice response. When you call in to a store, it says press 1 for this, press 2 for this, press 3 for this. Those are IVRs, right?
Gotcha.
And that tech's been around about 15, 20 years now, right? And so the innovation, the next revolution actually in that kind of tech is conversational AI. That's one of the big areas that conversational AI is coming in. Contact centers are moving to the cloud. And now you've got this natural language interface that is enabling contact center leaders, to be able to improve productivity. So we get called in and they said, there's no turning back. This is a pilot production. They have almost 2,000 stores in North America. And they said, we got to move all of them. So I walk in and here I have, an old voice network, with an IVR that's dying. I've got they gave me the technology vendor they'd already selected. I said, okay, I got to make that work. So I was a lead architect for the whole project, working with the technology team, with engineers, with the product managers, with the store operations team, everybody up and down the chain. Their structure was really strong because they said to me, you tell us what you need, we will get you whatever you need. We'll clear any, pathways that you need to get this done.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
In 4 months, we stood up 30 stores in production, like with production traffic. It started with one of their test sites. There were a lot of kinks to work out. So it's a crawl, walk, run, right? We did a test store, then we did 10 stores, then we got up to 20, then we did 30 in 4 months.
And what was the ultimate goal, Joti, when you start at the beginning, right? And you say, what's the problem? Why do we have the problem? And who are we solving it for? So when you ask those initial questions, what were those 3 answers that you got at the beginning? I'm just curious if it changed when you got to the end.
So the sorest problem they were having is that the employees in the stores were spending more time on the phone than they were helping clients
in store. So that was problem number 1. That
was problem number 1. Problem number 2.
And why was that a problem?
Because the IVR, the way it had been designed, it worked when it initially was set up to be designed, right? But it didn't catch up with the way the business was changing. The phone would ring, the call tree. So IVRs, the interactive voice response, the way they work is they have a call tree. You say, press 1 for this, press 2 for this. Or if you know your party's extension, it's touch tone dialing.
Sure.
It's not very flexible. So what would happen is the phone would ring. If somebody was not in that department, it would start ringing everywhere. But of course, that means every employee, if they're not at their desk, they can't answer the phone, which means somebody else has to pick up the phone. And the call volume had exploded, especially through the pandemic. It was already on the rise, but a lot more people are calling in, right? Where's my order? And of course, they have a lot of foot traffic that comes in. So you're getting hit in both directions. You're getting calls on employees. There was a high turnover because they're like, look, you either want me to be on the phone or you want me to answer a question for clients that are forming a line in the store.
Wow. Right. So then you hit customer service issues, then you hit negative reviews, then you hit all different kinds. And there was a building explosion during the pandemic. So everybody was at home going, oh, we need to improve this. Right. So
it became so clear, and not just this client, right? Across the board from a relative transformation standpoint, 2 years worth of transformations were being done in 2 months.
Wow. As we were being transformed, right?
That's correct.
As the pandemic was hitting us, it's just a very interesting sociological discussion too, right? We as customers are going, my life is changing because I am at home. My environment is changing. Therefore, by the way, every vendor ever, please radically transform alongside me as I am transforming in the face of this pandemic.
Exactly. Yes. So to draw you a contrast exactly on that point, before the pandemic, so I started Fresh River 3 years ago. We've been around for a long time, but it was a consulting company. We were doing IT projects, while I was in corporate, my husband and I. 3 years ago, when I decided I'm going to go focus on conversational AI, for the first 12 months, all the calls I would have with leads, they would simply be asking, what is conversational? There was just education. So it was in the nice to have, looks cool on, the radar, but I've got other things to do. That's what they would tell me, right? Mm-hmm. Come the pandemic, all of a sudden, And I had clients there. I had very large clients, Fortune 100 clients that were, leading the pack. You know those, right? The ones that live at the bleeding
early
edge.
Adopters. Sure.
Early adopters.
Yep.
So 2018, 2019, I got all the early adopters. Everybody else was like, yeah, oh, this is nice to know, but I don't know whether we have the time or the budget or, 2020, boom, my phone was ringing off the hook. I would have 2 to 3 inquiries for projects coming in every day.
Wow.
And I said, okay, that's when I accelerated. I said, there's a talent shortage, and boom, my team, the size of FreshRiver just ballooned, right? In the people that we needed. So it's been a journey. Some clients, including the one I had, which we were so happy. Everybody was so happy because it took off, right? It was the right set of ingredients. They had an executive team and the technical team were all ready, and they gave us the runway to go make it successful, right? I've got other projects where there's such political mire inside, even though they need it, they just can't take off and they sort of stay where they are. So every company.
If I can, so to finish this kind of case study, right, in looking at this home improvement big box store, we'll let you figure out which one that might be. So you help them kind of figure out their new artificial intelligence voice-driven system, right? I mean, that really is it. So what's the experience for the customer? Press 1, press 2. What's the experience for the customer now when they call in versus before?
Welcome to your XYZ
big box store.
How can I help you today?
And then the customer just goes, wall carpeting, drill bits.
Or I have an order that hasn't been delivered, or I'm looking for, I'll give you a perfect example right now. I was looking for like a Christmas wreath hanger. I said, I need a Christmas wreath hanger. It took me to seasonal.
Wow. It's a very specific request, as opposed to like my refrigerator's broken.
Oh no, you can say my refrigerator's broken too. Now remember, how will I know that a Christmas wreath hanger is going to be in seasonal? Like right now, the customers have to know, do I need to go to this department to find this, like this little drill bit, or the bulb that I want? I need a halogen bulb. I need an LED bulb. Boom. It takes you exactly where it needs to go. It saved you time, aggravation. You got to where you need to. And by the way, it will answer the question for you. Initially, what we would have, and this is where the growth path comes in, right? Stage 1, what we said was we're going to build this little baby AI assistant to at least guide people in one ask to where they need to go versus having to press 5 buttons. Okay. That's just the beginning. The second thing, that the little baby assistant, as it grows, will actually give you the answer. Do you have 10 halogen bulbs in stock? Yes. For the store closest to you, what is your zip code? Boom. Or by the way, from the phone number, it's actually, we were doing the lookup too, based on the phone number coming in. Is this the store closest to you? Yes, I do see 10 in stock right now.
Amazing.
Would you like to place an order? Think about the time to revenue. We just removed friction from the system to ultimately to revenue, not just customer experience, not just personalization, but all the way for them to actually place an order for the product.
So that means the customer can say, yes, I'd like to buy. Yes. And it takes your credit card number and...
Correct.
Wow.
Or I have your credit card on file ending in 0012. Would you like me to use that?
Amazing.
And by the way, I'm going to send you a text to confirm your order, because the text has a visual field versus voice. Because remember, conversational AI, it can be voice, it can be chat, it can live anywhere. It can live in your phone system. It can live on your website. It can live on your mobile app. It can live on your text. It can live in WhatsApp. This little baby that is growing can go to any channel.
So, Joti, what is something that you wish, I mean, our audience here, largely chief innovation officers, heads of innovation, product managers, customer service folks, customer experience, I should say, user experience folks. What do they need to know about AI that they don't right now that could really be helping them with their innovation tasks too?
They need to know, first of all, expectation setting. The tech has gotten really, really good these last few years. I can tell you, when I started on this journey 3 years ago and I was using it with the early adopters, it was good. It was probably in the infant stage. Okay. And every year since then, I'm watching the technology improve to the point that it can do more and more sophisticated things. So the thing to remember is it's a technology that doesn't stand still. So all the big players, there are 2,000 technology vendors in the conversational AI space. Just let's pause and think about that. 2,000.
Wow.
Right? Because it is a big market. The way I've designed FreshRiver is we didn't create a platform. We have a framework that can make any technology that you select help the client solve the problem that they have. So everybody from the vendors from the top, right? You've got the big tech companies, right? AWS, you've got Microsoft, you've got Google, you've got Amelia, you've got Core, we've worked with all of them. Okay. And we've also worked with many of the smaller, mid-size and smaller players because everybody's trying to figure out their angle of what they can do better, right? So if you pick up a Gartner report, you pick up a Forrester report, you're going to see, the usual thing around, we think that these technologies are great, but nobody is standing still. So if we did a project 2 years ago with one of these big platforms, when we get into the next project that is also working with that technology platform and vendor, we go do a refresh on where their tech is at because it's just getting better and better and better. Yes. So it's really a race, and AI is getting better. You know what's scary though? So this is the other thing I would tell your audience. Some of these AI algorithms are sitting in a black box. I've actually worked inside one of these big tech companies and I've seen things in the belly of the beast, right? When it is a black box, you don't know how the AI is making the decision it's making. So troubleshooting sometimes can be a problem.
Right.
Right. And so you actually do need engineers that understand how it works. Right. So, which is why, again, back to the framework that we've created at FreshRiver, it's use case extraction, conversation design, front-end development, back-end development, AI training, testing, analytics, right? And then roadmap management. Each one of these stages is very critical because when you're looking at just the tech, a tech-first design will always fail, I'll guarantee it, because it never takes into account the human psychology and philosophy of things.
Right, of course. So which brings me to your company itself, the way that you've designed it, the way your team and you work together is wholly unique. Frankly, I've never had a guest on this show that has developed we've heard from work from anywhere, but yours is really at a whole other level. So can you tell us about one of the core principles of FreshRiver is this democratizing of AI. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, I'm going to start with the context of the whole D&I, right? Diversity, inclusion, which, people are struggling with.
Yeah.
What I have said is from the beginning, AI, it actually requires diversity to be successful. I'll give you a simple example. How can you have a young man sitting in Silicon Valley designing a women's healthcare conversational AI service?
No, thank you. Yeah. No, thank you. I don't want that.
Right? Right. So the way I design the team is by intention, go and hire a complete diverse workforce that represents the human race. So what I tell clients is, look, we're coming in actually representing your users. So you don't have to struggle with the fact that I don't have enough people, of color or women or different age groups or demographics, because that example of a young man designing, a woman's health app, There's no way you can actually expect that poor guy to sit down and go, oh, I wonder how a woman would ask the question about menopause to the AI assistant.
I mean, 59% of men surveyed, I just read this. And so I feel like I should be citing exactly the study that I was reading, couldn't identify most of the reproductive organs on a woman, right? So I am going to get that study and I will put it in the show notes because otherwise I'm going to hear from people. But it was amazing to me that, given that same anatomical sketch that we saw in health class in the 7th grade, we're still struggling with understanding our own. By the way, I think the study also showed 49% of women could not identify all of her own organs either. So we all need a little help in this department. Mm-hmm.
We do. I mean, that's a whole different issue we're dealing with, right? Women's health. There's a lot of areas that need a lot of help.
Yep.
Right. So when I set out to design the company, and I wrote this down, right? I said, in the mission statement is it's got to be for humans, by humans, of humans. That's what AI is. And it is AI plus EI, and the E stands for emotional, economical, and ethical intelligence. So if you really think about those 3 words, and it's embedded into our framework of design, because if I feel like I'm responsible for creating a company that's going to give birth to AI assistants, it better be with humanity in mind, right? Plus capitalism, right? So going back to social capitalism.
Sure.
Right? I'm not a socialist, and I'm not just a money hungry capitalist, right? There is a way. So I'm actually trying to prove a point by saying, look, and I can do it because I started from scratch, right? If you get the human race creating AI for humans, the money will follow and we will solve these problems. So data science is, by the way, the other sister practice to AI. So you need humans that handle both the AI and the data, because data fuels AI and AI fuels data. You have to make sure you're doing it right from the beginning, because I will guarantee you, I've seen so many failed bots. Like if you just go to Facebook Messenger, or you just go to one of these airlines, like go try a chat bot somewhere or a voice bot, right? It fails, and it fails for one reason. It's not designed by people representing the users, right? And people are jumping over things like conversation design. By the way, there's new roles emerging for AI. Conversation designers was not even a role 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, there's like huge demands for it. AI trainers. So I am training my team. So I have folks that I have incoming talent. I'm really blessed, I have to say, because a lot of my peers and colleagues are struggling hiring. I have the best humans on the planet coming into FreshRiver. I'm just, it warms my heart, because I'm like, wow, while everybody's struggling to find this talent, I have incredible people that are on the FreshRiver team. And the other thing I'm doing is manufacturing talent. I've got incredible people. I've got grad student interns. I've got women who are pivoting into it. I'm also part of Women in Voice, the New Jersey chapter. They are getting trained on the framework I've created. They're getting trained on the design layers, on the technology layers, on the AI training layers, right? And all of them are thinking human first AI.
It's such a difference. And, approaching people with, from a salary and a living perspective, right? What do you need to be successful, right? Is a question that you ask of prospective employees. What do you need, right? As opposed to approaching them with here's the salary discussion.
Right. So I ask a very simple question. I say, what do you need to make to be financially secure? It's a different question than saying, what salary do you expect? Because embedded in that are people who have been low paid before. There's a lot of inequity. There's exploitation, by the way. I have now seen salaries that some of my AI engineers, my AI trainers were being paid by some pretty big companies. I said, that's exploitation. And they have had to work multiple jobs to make ends meet.
Wow. And everyone just assumes that the minute you step into tech, you're a billionaire, right? You're on the path to an IPO and everything's going to go great. And of course you work in tech, you're doing great, but that is not the case.
That's not the case. There are 2 bands, right? So there's a middle band of workers, and then there's a lower band of workers. The middle band of workers, get paid really well, but they are, I've coined this term, it's called modern day digital slavery, right? Where it is inhumane number of hours and the expectations. I had this one engineer in his 30s on the same project, by the way, that we had. And that company, by the way, is probably one of the best I've seen, but he was working so hard. He ended up with chest pains and his two young kids and in the emergency room. And I said, how many hours are you working? And he said, I'm working close to 50, 55 hours a week. And then on weekends, because this tech is so new, we're trying to keep up. I'm like, buddy, nothing is worth losing your health and life over. Right? I've had so many different experiences where these younger generations, by the way, especially millennials, they are being squeezed when it comes to, they're getting paid a lot of money. The financial sector, I see that as well. And I tell them, you have to make a decision, right? Yes, you can say, well, it's par for the course. We've got to work 60, 70 hours, I said, okay. But, when you get sick, where does it all matter? So, I tell people you have to eat, sleep, meditate, exercise, and rest. Only then can you do your best work.
It's true. Absolutely true.
So I'm trying to change the cultural, tone of how we do work as well.
Yeah, it is a fresh river that people are stepping into, right? This is a new way of thinking about it. I like that. So, another piece of this puzzle and is the internationalization. We happen to live in a country where we have lots of different accents, right? That large companies have to accommodate. I think New York, New Jersey area, right, is probably one of the most diverse areas of the country. How does it know? How does it know as we have people, not to mention, the B2B side, right? There are tons of contractors from different countries who are doing the work and very urgently need stuff. How does AI accommodate for that?
It's a great question. So when we talk about accents, we're talking about the speech, right? So this technology, speech to text, has been around at least 10 to 12 years, getting better and better, right? Is when you call in, understanding, even within the US, right? If you think about how many English accents there are native speakers, there's non-native speakers, and you wonder, well, what does native mean anymore anyway?
Right.
That recognition of voice tech has gotten so good. So the project that I was talking about earlier, the big box retailer, we had someone from the deep South call in and Midwest. And during our testing phase, I wanted to see whether the tech would recognize that. Because, guess what? There are many stores in the heartland of our country. And if this fails them, everything's over.
Right.
It recognized it. That's when I knew that the tech that we had selected, that had been given to us to go implement, I said, this will work.
That's great.
If you can do the deep twang, the deep South, the Midwestern accents, it's spectacular. By the way, the genetic coding of our voice, this is the next big thing coming up. When you talk about deep fakes and generating human voices, because you don't want to be talking to a robot, right? A robot sounding AI. Did you know that with our voice genes, if somebody recorded 3 to 4 hours, like Susan's recordings for 3 to 4 hours, we fed it to one of these engines, it will produce conversations you never had. I call it cool and creepy, right? So one is speech to text, is understanding the accent. The other is the text to speech. Because remember, I'm asking a question, I want to buy nails. What I just said has to be first converted to text so the algorithm can understand what I said.
That's how it works, Joti.
Yeah.
So I speak it, the computer puts it into text, and then it responds with a voice generated response.
So here's the flow, okay? So Susan just asked a question. That's speech,
the nails,
right? The nails. The algorithm recognized what you said first. It has to first synthesize the speed. It has to the speech, right? It takes the audio. It has to put it into text so that the next stage, which is natural language processing, that algorithm says, what did Susan ask, right? I want to buy nails. The intent is buying. The entity is nails. it then goes and sees whether it's been trained on how to answer that. So if the trainers have trained it on responding, and you've asked it in so many different ways, it has to be trained in how many ways can somebody ask for nails?
Where are the nails?
Yeah. The shiny tall, I'm just making that up, right? Yeah. But that training matters. It then says, oh, I know what she wants. And it goes and turns around and may ask you a question saying, what zip code are you on? Or I see you're calling from this number. Is this the store you want me to check? Smart. And when you say yes, it then goes and checks the inventory of that store to see if it has nails and comes back and tells you. We have plenty of boxes. How many would you like? It now took the text, processed it, put it back into speech to generate it, and it spoke to you.
Amazing. And what about urgency? I always think about AI. Could it possibly take over a 911 call? The urgency, and can it understand the tone and all of that good stuff? Can it write a love letter?
There are algorithms that have been purpose built, but I think 911 is one place. There's been a lot of debate about this because you asked a very critical question. Can it understand emotion? The cost of it getting it wrong is too high.
Too high. Yeah.
So if I were to tell somebody asked me, oh, what's the percentage that it would be accurate? I said, if you can get 60% accuracy, you're in great shape. 80% is spectacular. Do not expect 100%. 911 calls must be 100%.
Right. And now, even as humans, we still screw it up.
Right?
Yeah.
So I always say, think about the impact to the cost of the human life and living before you make a decision to put AI into it. So there's been cases, actually 2 lawsuits that are running right now. 2 states in the US decided to implement AI for food stamps and health benefits. And somehow the AI, and there was no human inside, no human in the loop, overseeing the decisions that the AI was making to accept or deny continued benefits.
Wow. Food. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It impacted someone's health and it impacted someone's ability to eat.
Yeah. That's not a small thing.
No.
Yeah.
So I would say, think about the human cost. It's just like, even self-driving cars. Have you noticed the Tesla doesn't have speech in it?
Yes. Why is that?
Because it could pick up somebody else's speech and do whatever it wants to do. If somebody in the back said, slam the brakes or
turn left or
human cost, right?
Right. And we're still screwing it up, right? We're still accidentally, hitting objects or people with a self-driving car. But I would argue it's still probably less than the mistakes us humans make in a car. We'll get there, right?
Correct. And that's why innovation has to happen, because you're right. It would be for the benefit of the good. And even though a loss of a single life is too much, in the end, people look at statistics, right?
Sure. I mean, how many accidents do we get in a car today anyway?
That's correct.
So if you could think about, some of the companies that you work with, and the one thing that you would want them to think about for this year and the next year about putting an AI project into place, what would it be? What would you want them to consider now to move forward? What do they need to do?
Start small. And if you haven't already begun, you're already late.
No pressure. But guess what?
No pressure.
You're already late.
So, we talk about early adopters, and then we talk about those that wait till the time has come. Yeah. And the pandemic pushed us to it. So now it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And if you haven't started, the reason I make that statement is if you haven't started, you're already late, because it takes time for the system to learn and get better. It's not like a mobile application or a web app that has only happy paths of the features you're putting in. This tech gets better and better with time, and it will accelerate much more exponentially than your other interface. It won't replace it. But the ability for it to give you that ROI as well as solve some of your, but create real value is when you get started. And you don't have to start with spending millions of dollars, right? You have to start small. In fact, I tell my clients, do not spend big money on this just yet.
Yep.
Find the right use case. You want to see that it's producing value, then you'll be able to prove and put in more money, right? To grow it in a big, substantial way.
Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 hot seat questions that I ask all of my guests on Innovation Storytellers. So if you could join any innovation team in human history that produced something fantastic, which innovation team would you have loved to have joined?
The Wright brothers.
The Wright brothers, our favorite bicycle repairmen. Who happened to invent an airplane.
Yeah, because they asked a very hard question and they said, wow, could we fly? So you know the equivalent question for AI is, can AI think?
Can AI think? Can bikes fly? Can AI think?
Can horses run faster? That was Henry Ford, right? Can horses run faster? What did they produce?
You know, I saw a fantastic picture of a car being drawn by a horse, you know, like when they were trying it out, he's like, well, I don't want to wear it out, you know, so I'm going to let my horse drag the car around for a while.
Exactly.
Okay. So question number 2, if you can, so what do you think is the greatest innovation of all time? You can have more than one, but what innovation really kind of makes you go, ah.
I would say it's the telephone.
The telephone. Mm-hmm. And why is that? Having come from AT&T, why is the telephone so great?
So if you think about the time before that, right, the world was very disjointed, right? I'm not disjointed, but we all lived in not that I was alive then, but humanity lived in their own bubbles, right? By creating communication, you just brought the world a little bit closer, right? In many ways, right? Families. I remember my grandfather used to travel to, from India to Kuwait. And I would hear these stories about when they would have to wait months before he came back. And all they would have were those letters, you know, when the phone. Can you imagine? I mean, that story, I love watching movies that depict that, right? It's amazing. And look what it did then. It took off. And then from communications came, the internet. A lot of these things would not be possible. I would not be sitting here doing these things if we hadn't. We stand on the shoulder of giants, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I pick that giant.
So what innovation would you love to see created that hasn't been yet? Or what's an annoyance that you wish somebody would fix somewhere? Either of those 2 questions are good.
So what I'm really excited about is Web3. So the idea of equity, decentralization, and democratization. Yes. I've seen so many people left behind. I was fortunate that I was born the time I was. I grew up with the internet. And I was able to ride the wave, right? And I was lucky that I was born in the house that I was. There's always the universe conspires.
Right.
There's so many people that have been left behind, which is why, be it AI or Web3, this is the time we can correct for that, course correct. So for me, it's about whoever thought about the fact that what's the next generation of the internet going to look like? Because equity is a big problem. It's a big problem.
Huge. Yep.
Right. So to me, that's exciting. Who would have thought that would be something that's needed? Because we cannot fix old problems the old ways. We got to fix the old problems in new ways of thinking.
I love that. I love that. Joti Balani, thank you so much for joining me today on Innovation Storytellers. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is probably the best. You can reach me at Joti Balani. I think I'm the only one. In fact, if you Google my name, turns out I'm the only one that pops up, which is cool and creepy at the same time. But Susan, thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed it and appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much, Joti. Now you might be asking, Susan, why innovation storytelling? Well, the truth is that An innovation story told well not only breaks down communication barriers so you can drive change and new growth, but it also helps other people remember and champion your work. And it propels your best ideas forward faster to secure you the runway, resources, and recognition you so richly deserve. In other words, stories are memory-making devices that significantly reduce the time it takes for you and your innovation to be understood. But like many leaders, you probably never got the memo that storytelling skills would be central to your success. Well, I've got some good news for you. It's not too late because I've got you covered. Whether you need an expert to come and speak to your innovation leaders, you need training in the art and method of innovation storytelling, or you just need the support and guidance of a consultant who can get you where you want to go in less time, visit www.susanlindner.com today to learn more and to set up a call to discuss your needs. I'm so looking forward to connecting with you and to helping you tell a great innovation story. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. And leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of this episode. We'd love to hear from you. And if you didn't like what you've heard, just forget everything I've said.